Hello, Miri. Welcome. Nice to have you joining us this evening.
Hey, I'm joining you from my house. I'm back in my home. I feel much better. Hopefully, no, unexpected interruptions.
I just want to say thank you. Not only are you our favorite colonel, you're probably our favorite Israeli because you have always made yourself just so available to all of us and our audience. And wherever I went over this past week, people just stopped me to say, "Is Miri okay?"
So thank everybody for that. It's such a good feeling to know that people are wondering. And it was a crazy 12 days, even for us. I think that one of the things is because we're so resilient that people don't always realize that resilience, it's still challenging. Okay. Yeah, yeah. And this took a new level of resilience. And here I am back with my regular, here I am, my studio. I'm happy.
Mary, how did you find the international media during the war? Were people really curious? Were they even-handed? Was this different to kind of the sort of interviews that you've done, and you've done a lot of them? Was it different to the sort of interviews that you've been doing relating to the conflict in Gaza?
So, yes and no, because the framing, even of the 12 days of the what everybody's calling, 12 days, Israel-Iran with the United States, it was framed separately to a certain degree, but Israel was still presented as the aggressor. Israel was presented as the one that initiated it. Israel was presented not that it was like, wow, you have such capability. But the first question that I got from the BBC, June 13th, Friday morning, just a couple hours into it, the first question I got was, you have such amazing intelligence. You did such amazing targeting. Why did you kill so many civilians? And I'm thinking, really? That's the question you have to ask me June 13th in the morning? The other aspect is that the side that looks at Israel, it's a very challenging one because it's looking at Israel as if this Iran portion, is kind of more of the same, like the Houthis, like Hamas, like Hezbollah, and it wasn't. Okay, we're talking about warheads of 1,000 kilo, 1,500 kilo, and I was very personal, and because I am personal, I kind of made the media be personal. And I did it to I've gotten a lot of feedback on that aspect where they would ask me a question and I would put into it that I'm not at home, that I can't be at home because I don't have a safe room, the type of warheads that the Iranians are using, the destruction. Yes, we've built amazing safe rooms, so I wasn't at home. Thank God my house is still here, right? But I couldn't stay here because if it had been hit, that would have been horrific. People were killed that way. So I think that in that sense, it was sadly for me still in the framing, showing Israel as the aggressor. Not enough understanding of the broader sense. But I found different voices all over. I was pleasantly surprised by a few interviews I did with Australia because I view Australia right now as being very challenging. And I did a few interviews there on different ones, and I was kind of surprised. They at least to have been, oh my God, their coverage of us. And this one they looked at differently. I think they're more threatened by the Islamic regime and what it exports.
How do you find dealing with the BBC?
So first of all, it's to breathe in deep. One of the things I think the most feedback that I get about the BBC when I'm on, people will write me, "How don't you get mad?" Because you're sitting and watching and going, you're going to get mad at the questions that they ask, and it's a very passive aggressive relationship there. So what do you do? The first thing is that you don't get mad. Okay, it's about framing. And I gently push back and I gently push back at their questions. It's one of the reasons that I won't do barely international interviews that are through a translator. Because when it's through a translator and you get a really nasty question, it's very difficult to push back at the question because it's already going through the translation and it so I stopped doing BBC Arabic because they had even worse questions and I would push back at the question and it would become the wrong debate. Why do I say I gently push back? When they ask their horrible questions in the way that they do, and I'm like, civilians dying in a war is a horrible thing in Tel Aviv and Tehran, anywhere, and we never target civilians. Okay, it's like it's how you step into the question. I want at the end for the viewer to hear a calmer voice that they're going to hear the aggression. They're expecting to see the Israeli aggression. They're expecting to see us be, with a hand. And think of the bulk of Israelis who speak. They have very strong voices and they make points, and so they sound aggressive. And I come in and I just try not to do that. But you can't change their framing. The best you can do is make them be more balanced and think a little bit more.
Well, the time has just gone 7 p.m. in South Africa, 8 p.m. in Tel Aviv, and 8:30 in Tehran. And it is a great pleasure to welcome back Colonel Miri Eisin. For those of you who are watching last week Sunday, you know we started our discussion. I think we got about 20 minutes into the discussion, and then the sirens went off and Miri went running to a bomb shelter. She wasn't at home at the time. She went running to a bomb shelter, and all week people have said to me, is Miri okay? And I'm just enormously grateful to her for giving of her time to be able to come back and continue the discussion that we started last week. It is just such an honor and privilege to have one of the great intelligent insights into what's happening in the Middle East join us and give so generously and freely of her time. So Miri, welcome back. It's just such a great pleasure to have you. And we're glad that you're safe and in one piece. And we've got a great discussion ahead of us, because now we know a lot more than we did a week ago. Just before we begin, just a reminder that these webinars are brought to you by the South African Jewish Report. This is our 183rd webinar that we've done. We've been watched approximately 6 million times since we started this at the beginning of COVID. And of course, really importantly, our objective is to keep our community and international jury informed about what is happening. And so please pick up your copy of this week's edition of the Jewish Report, obviously distributed free of charge, and you can get it at your local Checkers or supermarket or kosher butchery or Woolworths or Discam. We're all over the place. And in this week's edition, we have some of Ilan Ossendryver's remarkable photographs that he's taken in Israel during the 12 days of the war between Israel and Iran. We also launch our National Jewish Dialogue to dovetail together with the president's call for a Jewish dialogue. You'll see yesterday that the Democratic Alliance withdrew from the dialogue, but we think that we as Jews have a lot to say. So we're launching our National Jewish Dialogue to speak about the country, to speak about our community, to speak about our relationship with Israel and world Jewry, to speak about those things that matter to us. And we're inviting you to be part of this National Jewish Dialogue. Our other headline, of course, is that Philip Krawitz of Cape Union Mart has decided to take on some of the protesters who've been defaming him outside his stores for his support for Israel. Philip has been a great liberal voice and peacemaker in South Africa and the South African Jewish community, with great efforts to bring peace to the Middle East. And he has been specifically targeted by the BDS movement and by the radical jihadists. He's decided to take them on in court. We wish him well in that endeavor. He has our full support. And that's the front page edition of the Jewish Report this week. And don't forget, if you can't get hold of a hard copy, you can download us on sajr.co.za. We now have about 150,000 unique people who come onto our website every month to look at the Jewish Report. And if you wish to see any of our past webinars, they're also available both on YouTube and on our website, on the Jewish Report website. You can go and have a look. And if you wish to download, we do both an A4 print at home edition as well as our standard broadside edition as well. So you can get all of that by just going on to sajr.co.za. And with that, let's dive straight in. Miri, seeing you are kind enough to give us some insight last week, and you gave us a great sense of the flavor of what Iran is like. And maybe we can just spend a minute or two talking about Iran, the Iran that Israel knew in 1979, a close friend of Israel, is not the Iran that we know of today. Give us a little sense about what Iran is like today.
Iran is a country of 92 million people. 92 million. We're talking about a very large country, pretty much the same size as Turkey. I'm saying that I don't actually know how many people there are in South Africa. Somebody's going to look up and tell me pretty soon. But when we're talking about Muslim countries, I'll remind everybody that the 5 most populated Muslim countries, even the 6 most populated, are Sunni countries. They would be Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, Nigeria. These are all heavily populated Muslim countries, Nigeria and Africa, and after that, Egypt. And when I look at Iran, what's unique about Iran is it's 92 million, a very large country, and it's made up over 85% by Shiite Muslims. So that's a very large Shiite Muslim population. Iran itself, Persian, 2,500, 3,000 years of history. You know what, Howard? Let's go to our own scriptures. Let's go into the books in the Bible of Ezra and Nehemiah. Let's read there about Cyrus and him saying the Jews can come back and be here. We're talking about Persian rulers, thousands of years ago that are also part of Jewish history. I never know. How do you say Ahashverosh in English? I don't even know.
Achashverosh.
Ahashverosh, okay, between Purim and between Ezra and Nehemiah and the building of the Second Temple under the Persian rule. We're talking about a language and a culture, a culture, and a land. And in that, just look at the similarities when you talk about Jews and Jews in the land of Judea and the different time periods. And that's always been there. The language itself, Persian, is a different language. People often think that it's like Arabic. It is not. From the 7th, 8th century, with the advent of both Arabic and Islam, Persian is written in Arabic letters, but it's a very different language. And I say that again because erroneously people go Persian, Arab. No, 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 no. Very different. Persians are not Arabs. Arabs are not Turks. It's 3 different languages, 3 different cultures. And in that sense, it's like, and again, Persia is an area, it's a land, it's a culture. And in it, they have been a highly educated people, both under the Shah. And I do want to remind people, the Shah was not a good guy, but we had a very strong relationship with Iran and with the Persian people. But it's not that the Iran before 1979 was a beautiful democracy. It was not, but it was a much more Western-oriented country. And from 1979, the change that happened is the Islamic Revolution. It's really hard to think of it in those terms because it's not similar to what happened in revolutions in other places. Here, they took the type of regime and went from a semi-dictatorship, but it was open, Western connections to the world, to being an Islamic regime that is run in accordance to very strict Sharia, which is the Muslim law, very strict Sharia Muslim law. It's a strict interpretation of Sharia Muslim law. It is the Shiite interpretation. And I say that because when you go there, and those are things that you've seen, and it's already 2 full generations, that's 45 years, the education system teaches in accordance with the Sharia law. Now, they do teach what I'm going to call STEM subjects. They're not disconnected from the world. It's not that they want to go back and live in the 7th century, but their interpretation of their day-to-day life and law is done in a strict adherence to Muslim law without going back to the past. So the change is just dramatic. And around half of the population today, more or less, hard to know, around half of the population are very strong adherents to this strict Muslim law. Those are the ones who are going to support the regime. They were educated by the regime. I'm not going to say that they're less educated and less knowledgeable of modern issues, but that strict interpretation comes from a very deep ideology. And I'll just end by saying that Khamenei, who is the supreme leader, the supreme religious leader, but he's also the one who makes the definitions on what happens in the Islamic regime. He's the top interpreter of the law, and he's the one who looks also at the Islamic policy. And he'll, in that sense, say that what they do, I mean, this is about ideology that is then put into policy, and it almost could be 180 degrees to what Iran was up until 1979. There's a large population that does not want to live in the strict accordance to Islamic law. And the last point I'll make, though, is that all of the population is very proud to be Persian, very proud of that heritage. And so when you attack Iran even though what we were attacking was the Islamic regime, they all come and say, oh, Iran was attacked, the Persians were attacked, and not just Israel attacking the Islamic regime with all of its different capabilities.
So, Miri, what do they want from Israel? Do they really want to destroy it? Is that part of the ideology, or is just that a bit of bluster?
I don't think it's bluster. And I say that very sadly. I wish I could answer you otherwise. And I will say that it's always going to be a question until they actually do it. And I pose that because Hamas has also written into their charter that they want to annihilate the Zionist entity. And that was bluster until October 7th, where they tried to kill and kill and kill. The Islamic regime views the Zionist entity, and I'm using their terms on purpose because they call us the Zionist regime or the Zionist entity. Why entity? Because that's less than a regime. It's like this entity. It's an alien. And the combination that they've had throughout the years of the Islamic regime, it was from the beginning, from Khomeini, who was the first Islamic religious leader, the one who came back from exile in France, arrived in 1979, and then over a year or so established the Islamic regime and put into that Islamic law, put into anniversaries in the calendar, put into the mindset of people that what you need, one of the elements, it's not the only one, that you need for that Islamic regime to be worldwide is to annihilate the Zionist entity. What they will say, however, is they have nothing against Jews. This isn't about Jews. It's about the Zionist entity. And on that one, we could have a whole, seminar of, why do we need a seminar? We're living through it right now of the absolute lack of separation worldwide between what is Israel, what is Zionism, what does that mean, and between what is it to be a Jew and what is our relationship to Israel and to Zionism, that lack of understanding. So they've been against the Zionist entity. And the last point I'll make, which is part of that, is that from the early 1980s, when they say that they're not anti-Semitic, okay, that it's not about the Jews, it's about the Zionist entity, they have hosted, they actually took it from, I don't remember where it was before, but from a different Muslim country, but they brought to Tehran, and they have an annual, I hate saying this, I'm sharing this because I want people to learn. They have an annual Shoah denial conference. They've had one every single year since 1981. Okay, that's before Khamenei. It's a conference where they sit and say that the Shoah didn't happen. And I say that, to South African Jews, to Australian Jews, to Jews worldwide, to anybody worldwide. It's every element of Shoah denial that there is. And it's because the Jews invented and exaggerated, and it was World War II, and it was a war. And so when we say, do they really want to annihilate us? I'm going to say, sadly, yes, they do. And it's ideological. And when you teach people to hate, they hate.
So, what do we know about their nuclear weapon? How close were they to achieving it? And if they had been successful, how would that have changed the Middle East?
The Islamic regime, and this is under Khamenei, it started after Khomeini died. Khamenei, who has been there from 1988, he's heading in, he himself is 85 years old. He's been for many, many years the supreme religious leader. He was the one who said at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, it was a war that took place after the Islamic regime went to power and tried to also go on in and take over bits of Iraq, and Iraq didn't like that, and Iraq, anyways, stalemate war there. What Iran said is, what I need is something to keep me safe. I want to say something which is odd coming from me. Their quest for a nuclear weapon was not about annihilating Israel. A quest for a nuke, that was not why they wanted the bomb. They wanted the bomb because they thought Iraq had the bomb. They wanted the bomb because very built into the Shiite mentality, that's of the bulk of Iranians, but there are Shiites worldwide. It isn't, if you take the over 2 billion Muslims in the world, around 90% are Sunni and around 10% are Shiite. I'm just to give people an idea of the things. And Shiites worldwide feel, and this has always been part of the way they look at things, that they're the oppressed. And I say the oppressed, and think of that in the South African arena, what it means to be the oppressed and who is the oppressor. And that quest for a nuclear weapon was, we're the oppressed, we're the ones under attack, Iraq, others. It can't be. I want to remind everybody here that they border Pakistan. And Pakistan has had nuclear weapons from late 70s, early 80s, and they border them. And so for them, it was like, and they have a very strong capability academic. So when they started on the path, it was one that they did quite openly, not for nuclear weapons, but that they were going for nuclear capabilities for what you call peaceful nuclear works. Still under the Shah, they had started to build a nuclear reactor for electricity that was being built initially by the Soviet Union that then left, and then Germany came along. And then you go, really? This is a country that has endless oil. It needs a nuclear reactor. I just want to say that this country with all of this oil right now barely has electricity in the country, meaning they export it, they sell it because they want the income, but they don't actually have for themselves. When they started to go along the path of nuclear weapon capability, they are signed on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they were signed on it from the 1960s when it came to be. The NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, is a treaty that we should be aware Israel is not signed on. And I say that because Iran is, which means that every nuclear site inside Iran is supposed to be under supervision, and they are signed on it that says that they will not make nuclear weapons. And in the 1990s, the Israeli intelligence community, and at that stage I was heavily inside that community, started to see that they were doing different nuclear development that are not peaceful nuclear development. They're not about making clean electricity. They're not about medicine, because, we talk about nuclear medicine. We talk about electricity nowadays. There's going to be that question, what's better, what's worse? Between oil and gas and nuclear, we could have a whole debate. And all of these different aspects, to me, bite into where they were going, because the International Agency, Atomic Agency Energy, IAEA, was the one that went along and said, why are you doing that? And they were like, oh, no, no. And then the IA, because they're under the NPT. And in time, it was very clear that they were trying to develop the nuclear fusion material, the one that at the end does that horrific explosion, in every single possible way. Because there are a lot of different ways to get to that nuclear material. The most famous is when you build a reactor that's all it's supposed to do. That makes plutonium. That's like the fast way if you can do that. But there are lots of other ways where you take the uranium, which is out there everywhere. There's lots of uranium also as a mineral in Iran. They have no problem to get their hands on that and to enrich it to the degree that you can turn it into military grade capabilities. They've done it on every path. The international community has been very aware of this. And to be fair, I don't think anybody in the international community wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. The path that the international community said was, in dialogue, let's have them stop. I'm talking to you in South Africa. In dialogue, you stopped. In dialogue, Libya stopped. Okay, we're talking about other countries that were threshold countries, nuclear capabilities, those and others, that in that dialogue stopped. And the international community likes dialogue. And I'm not against dialogue. I'm not against the dialogue. I'm against the result that parallel to the dialogue all of the years, they were going further and further and further. 2 weeks before, or really in the week before, or a few days before Israel did the 12 days of attacking both the nuclear and the other sites inside Iran, the International Atomic Energy Agency put out a report that said they have enriched uranium in an amount which is only for military grade, in a way that is totally against the NPT. As I said, again, they are under supervision. In this week, with everything going on, the Iranian parliament, and there is such a thing, all full of good Islamic regime men, voted to leave the NPT. I do not yet know if they're actually going to do that. Was that
So
too much information?
no, I think that was perfect. One of the things South Africa has done as a puppet state of Iran is protect Iran at the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's been one of the objectives of our government, which of course has also brought the case on behalf of Iran to the ICJ and expanded BRICS to bring Iran out of isolation into a broader network. So we understand the importance of the International Atomic Energy Agency here and the role and the complicity of our own government in doing that. Just before we go on, I want to welcome Ilan Ossendryver, who seems to be sitting at the dark in the dark. Ilan, you're in Addis Ababa at the moment. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. I'm in Addis. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you very well. Ilan
I
has been
know I'm in
one.
a room here somewhere in Addis Ababa, not a lot of light. Unfortunately, I wasn't really thinking I was going to give a talk this evening here as opposed to anywhere in the world. But I'm here in Addis en route back home after 12 days of covering Israel, which was very unexpected. And I
So
would to
Ilan arrived 1:30 in the morning, and by 3 o'clock he was sitting in a bomb shelter. But he did take his camera. He's an award-winning international photojournalist, press photojournalist. And Ilan, you're going to be showing us some of the images of damage in Tel Aviv a little later
yeah.
on.
Okay, yeah, but we have to do it sooner or later because I have to catch a plane back.
So I want Mary to start telling us the story of the war, and then Ilana, I'm going to take a 5 minute break and ask you to show us some of the images. But
Okay.
Mary, I would love it if you could tell us about the Israeli operation. It seems
It,
to many that it was a textbook operation. It couldn't have gone better from Israel's perspective. Is that a correct assessment?
it is on several different levels. One, we were targeting 5 types of targets, and the different 5 types of targets were all hit again and again, meaning you're not necessarily going back to the same place, but that 5 categories were hitting nuclear sites, that also the United States then hit 3 of them, hitting, and especially this is of importance, to get air superiority, you have to be able to hit air defenses, and we were consistently hitting those. We had absolute air superiority, which is, even now, as I'm saying that, it's hard for me to believe. The air superiority means you have to constantly make sure that you keep it up, that it isn't something you do once and it's done. They have other capabilities. It's a very big military and a very big Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So nuclear, air defenses, the missile and drone launch sites, which are military bases. They can be out in the boondocks, and boondocks is, just far away in Western Iran or in Eastern Iran or in Southern Iran. We were mainly focused on the missile launchers and the drones that could reach Israel. But at a certain stage along the way, we were also attacking the missile launchers and drones that could reach countries closer nearby, because we're over 1,000 kilometers away, and you have the Gulf countries in Qatar that at the end was also attacked by Iran. So those are 3 different categories. The 4th category is that Israel was hitting what I'm going to call the manufacturing facilities and the R&D of the missiles and the drones. The missiles, the drones, the air defense, and the nuclear are all under the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iran has 2 militaries. One that's nothing, it's a dud, it's called the Iranian Army. And the other is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're totally separate. It's a totally separate system. And everything that we were targeting is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And the 5th category, because you've gotten with me, nuclear, air defense, missile launcher sites, and the R&D and manufacturing facilities, because the 5th one is that we were hitting the decision makers. We were hitting the command and control. And you do that because it both gives you better capabilities while you're attacking. You're hitting their command and control, their capability to respond. And all of the above, as I say, those 5 different categories, we did every single day, the 12 days. The only hiatus that we took, and even that, I have to say, I'm not sure how much of a hiatus it is when the United States was attacking in the 3 nuclear sites. But we had, because we all heard about that, right, separately in the middle of the night. But right before that and right after that, we were attacking. We attacked with what I'm going to call air platforms in general, both manned and unmanned aircraft, additional capabilities. that's going a far way and coming back. Here, can I knock on my head, knock on whatever, say tfu, 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 very Israeli, is when you said it's extraordinary. Oh my God, I am still in awe of the fact that, can you imagine how many people, just an airplane goes up, a UAV, an unmanned air vehicle, okay, that goes up, goes the whole way there, goes the whole way back. The technological aspect that, okay, 2 UAVs, one ran out of gas, and then Iran said they felt it, but it ran out of gas, a UAV, unmanned, and a second one was probably knocked down out of, we did so many attacks there with manned and unmanned, and they all went. And they all came back and they did all of these different attacks. So that's the textbook aspect of it. We still do not know the exact BDA, but I can talk about that after Ilan shows the pictures, because the one thing I want to say is the reason Israel was targeted on the launch sites is part of the prevention of those missiles from arriving in Israel. One drone out of over 1,200 that they fired at us arrived in Israel, one. That's amazing. That's like, 99.9% interception. When it comes to the missiles, what the IDF has put out is that we intercepted 86%. We're used to the 90s. I have to tell you, 86 is amazing. But I think that what we're going to see now is the 14% that we didn't intercept. We're talking about very heavy payloads on the warheads, meaning what Hamas fired at us would usually have no more than 100 kilo, 150 kilo would be very, very big, most of them even less. What Hezbollah was firing at us was a bit more. But what Iran was firing at us, and because it's also a ballistic missile that goes up and comes back in, and so the impact is at an incredibly fast speed, and it's both a warhead of 1,000 kilograms of TNT, 1,500. So it's both the place of impact and then the shock wave. And the shock wave is what brings about an enormous part of that destruction.
So what surprised you about the entire conflict?
About these 12 days?
About the 12 days, yeah.
I don't want to say I'm surprised, but I'm in awe of the IDF. I was surprised because I thought that there would be way more casualties in Israel. Isn't that a terrible thing to say? That's what I thought. There was a reason that I stopped last week and I went into a safe room. I understand the impact, and 86% is less perhaps than other people's expectations in our percentage of interception. But I thought that there would be way more casualties in Israel. And my heart goes out to the 29 that were killed. And I thought that there would be 1,000, if not 2,000. That's what I thought. And the second thing is that I was surprised at how immediately we had air superiority over Iran. Again, that's the flip side of that. So did we overestimate it? Because they did not want us to be attacking in Tehran and Shiraz and Mashhad, in all the different missile and drone sites and the facilities and all of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Look at what we did. And it was from the beginning. And as I said, I'm in awe.
So, Ilan, if I could ask you to share your screen and also give us a sense, please, of what it's been like as a South African. You were visiting your daughter and your grandchild in Israel, but you were there with the camera, as you're always with the camera, and you left the bomb shelters to go document a lot
That's
of.
right.
So tell us a little about that.
So the reason why I actually came to Israel was to launch my book, and of what I covered after a year of Israel after October 7th, and to celebrate my 1-year grandson's birthday. And I ended up covering a new war that I wasn't expecting to be at. And so I want to show you some pictures that I've taken over of the 12 days. And one of the most interesting pictures I took is this one. It was in central Israel. I'm not going to say where, but I saw this door that had been totally smashed, and the map of Israel was kind of blown out of it. And all I see surrounding it is all this glass, and it kind of sums up of what's happening around us Israel and the rest of the Middle East. They're breaking down, and we are still remain stable. And so for me, this is one of the most powerful images I've taken. And so for people don't know that we get these alerts, and these red alerts is exactly where missiles are aimed at. And this is what we were faced with every day. And so we are sent into bomb shelters, and a lot of bomb shelters weren't that ready, but we had to go to bomb shelters. And some bomb shelters have lots and lots of people because it's a 12-story building, so the whole building goes down. And where my daughter was living was just a few families, and so it was smaller. And so we had to kind of become psychologists as well for children in order for them not to panic. And it became a whole thing. And for my daughter, it was art. And then also suddenly you found in different places in Tel Aviv, well, all over, but like, for example, in parking lots where people set up tents and became tent cities. And when I first went to one of them and I saw the destruction, it actually takes your breath away at what it looks like. You know, I covered the 1991 Gulf War, and those Scud missiles were not nearly as powerful as what we're seeing here. And it was just incredible to see these buildings totally disintegrated, and just the framework. And these are all over. I mean, for example, here you can see how windows and buildings are smashed up, tall buildings, the whole facade taken down. And you're talking about different areas. This is somebody's apartment on the sixth floor of a building somewhere. And this is what's left of it, of a whole area. Now, what is very interesting about this whole area is that, because, as Miri was saying, is that if you look into the horizon of this picture, 500 meters square has to be taken down, because a lot of the old buildings in these areas have become unstable because of the power of the missiles, of these ballistic missiles. So even buildings on the horizon have to be checked if they're stable enough to live in. And this is actually about a road away from where I used to live, where my children were brought up in Israel. And it brings home how close everything is in Israel. And no matter what, you all still see the flags flying, and the trecin that are broken. And these are people's houses that were beautiful, beautiful places to live in, you know, and with harmony, totally overnight destroyed. And all this has to be redone. So, but what I think was the most incredible thing about the resilience of the Israeli people, when I went there, they were not screaming, they were not crying. They looked at it and said, you know what, we'll rebuild. And that's what I loved about the Israeli people. They weren't going out and screaming and hating. They said, we're going to rebuild, and our hearts are still intact. And that's what I loved about the resilience of being in Israel at this time. I mean, you know, cars, people lost everything. And for example, you know, these are just some of the images I'm showing. And thousands of windows blown out of buildings because of the pressure after the bomb. And what I love always, you will find straight away, we will be putting an Israeli flag. And what I found here, this was also very extremely sad for me, is that because of the power of these bombs and how it generates outwards, a lot of birds and other animals were killed. Those who live on the outside of buildings. And this to me was one of the most amazing images. This was a policeman crying after he had taken from a building that has been totally crashed and blown up, that he saved these dogs. And he was in tears. And look at the animals. They knew they were being saved. So life doesn't matter if you're a human being or whatever you are, you're important. And that's what I love about Israel. And people's homes totally gone. And children's toys totally smashed up and lying on the ground. And this was once like a room, exactly what happened when I documented October 7th, when you saw beautiful homes with children's toys suddenly gone. people's lives, and this person was a collector of antique cars. I mean, look at the rock from his own house that fell on it. And people's cars, just cars everywhere, just littered everywhere, wherever you went. And just the power of the people, of the research, the search crews that went into these buildings. You have to take your hats off to them. The Zaka, the people that go in looking floor to floor, looking for people and bringing out people that were trapped. They are unbelievable human beings. And again, a row of cars, and immediately the flag goes up. And people just finding what belongs they can take. I didn't have time to see what pictures she had. I didn't want to interfere, but this is what she said she could get out of the apartment. And this person taking what he could get out of his apartment, a suitcase and his piano. There was a couple that had their antique violins they brought out of their apartments. And of course, straight away went up the Trump posters. And yeah, that was for me some of the images I wanted to show tonight. And it was incredible that I found myself there. And again, proud to be there, and proud to see the Israelis the next day after the declared ceasefire going to the beach, living. But the truth is, it cannot be perfect until the hostages come home. We still got to get the hostages, and that's how people in Israel feel. There's no life. You can go out and do what you need, but there's no life in Israel until they come home. Until then, Israel will live. It will carry on creating, but we need to get them home. And that's what that's my message, is we need to get them home, that Israel can reboot and show the world of what they are capable of and what we are and who we are.
Ilan, thank you for joining us. You have to go run to get on an aeroplane to come back to South Africa. Really appreciate that you were able to share those photographs with us.
Absolute pleasure.
And we look forward to having you home tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I'm arriving on my birthday, so I want a nice bottle of whiskey, have a whiskey with you.
Deal. Absolute
All right,
deal.
cheers. Keep safe.
Thank you so much, Ilan. Miri, one of the questions that came in from Sydney, and just a reminder to everyone watching us on Facebook, on Zoom, and on YouTube, that this is a conversation that involves you as well. So please post your question, and we'll make sure that Michael and myself bring those questions through to Miri. But one of the questions that Sydney asks is, 14% of missiles got through. Is that a failure? You thought that there would be more casualties, but is that in fact a failure?
It's hard to say right now. I don't think of it as a failure. I think of it as different from expectations. And I think everybody can understand there's a difference between it wasn't 95% and it was 86%, and the fact that nobody else in the world could do so. When you look at the pictures of the destruction, when you live here and you go and drive by and you see the two sides of it, the destruction and then the cleaning up, you go, any missile that gets through is too much. But that's unrealistic. That is unrealistic. So to me, it has to do with learning. These 12 days were not like anything else. I think that I was more shocked by Beersheba than by Tel Aviv, because the hospital in Beersheba that was hit, that was something that for everybody was just so hard. And 4 people were killed early in the morning on the day of the ceasefire in Beersheba. And I don't see it as a failure, but I think that we're all feeling, what if it's not 90%, then it was a failure. And I'm going 90%, I'll say it otherwise. The 14% that got through, that's the damage they did. My heart goes out to those killed. As I said, my expectation was that it would kill way more, because the whole idea of the interceptors is that they stop what they can, and they stopped so many, and we act responsibly. And I think that Ilan just described that, and those photographs are absolutely amazing. I feel so privileged that I got to see them as well right now, because that's what we were doing. You were talking to me, right? I'm the expert for the last 20 months until June 13th. I never left my house in a siren. I went to the area that I defined as the safe area, and I understood that what was coming in from Iran is different. And I can't be, because many, sadly, okay, I mean, most of the people killed are people who were not in a standard safe room. There were those, when a missile hits the standard safe room, not a lot is left, but that's the exception. And so it's the combination of acting responsibly and the interceptor. So it's not a failure. It's, in an odd way, it's a huge success. And in military terms, way lower than the estimates. When it comes to the reconstruction and how that impacts Israeli society right now, I completely relate to what Ilan was saying. Until we have closure on what's happening against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the 50 hostages, the 20 alive, the 30 that are held there as collateral, as bargaining chips, with their dead bodies, until that ends, I don't know how much we managed to face the questions that you're asking. We have a lot of questions we're going to be asking, but right now it was not a failure. And we had air superiority, which is amazing, meaning if it had gone on, the percentage would have gotten better, not worse, because we were destroying their launchers. On the other hand, they would have fired 2,000 kilograms at us, 3,000 kilograms at us. What a thought.
Yeah. Mary, can we turn to the Americans? Is it
Yes.
conceivable that Israel would have entered into this war without a plan B if the Americans had not entered? There has to have been a plan for Natanz and for Fodor and for Isfahan, if the Americans hadn't gone to bomb. Do you think this was all arranged beforehand? Do you think Donald Trump was waiting to see how things were going before entering? And did Israel have a plan B in order to destroy those without B-2 bombers and without MOPs?
Always look at all the options. And when I say you can't know all the options, but you try and look at as many as you can. Israel has been training for many years about the nuclear sites, including the 3 that the United States bombed. And by the way, 2 out of those 3 we'd already bombed before they came, but they came with a type of warhead and bomb which can just do way more damage than what we have. I absolutely think that we would have thought of what we do, because this campaign was something that we started. I don't think we got US approval. I don't think that we did it because the US said okay. I think there was a window that had to do with our capabilities. I don't think that the United States wasn't in the know, but I don't think that they had to give an okay. And when I say that, I think that you have lots of other options. When you have air superiority that take more time, and if they take more time in the meantime, missiles coming into Israel, you just saw the damage, what that did to us. These 12 days these were not like anything, and I've lived here for 54 years. Not like anything. I was here in the Yom Kippur War as a kid. This was not like anything, okay? This is a type of both the fear and the action and being in the bomb shelters, and at the end again, 28 people killed, lo aleinu. But as I said, I thought way more. So I think that that plan B in that sense is that you have the air superiority, you continue, you don't stop as we stop now because the US did what they did at those 3 nuclear sites, and you approach those sites in a different way. Let's let our imaginations go wild. There have been international publications that have said that there were Israeli troops on the ground. I mean, if we had air superiority, then you can bring in troops and take them out. And okay, and that's a different way to approach it at all. If you isolate the place and do it on the ground, not from above. And I'll remind everybody that there's no question that a lot of technology was used in these 12 days. It wasn't just the hardware, and I don't think of a B-2 as hardware or a UAV or an Israeli aircraft as hardware, okay? But there was a lot of additional type of technology that you can use nowadays, and maybe they're more effective and efficient when you're over there as opposed to when you're doing them from afar. And maybe some of them you can also do from afar and you don't have to say anything and keep that capability for the next time. And I add into that I don't, and again, I don't know And in time, I am expecting full disclosure from certainly President Trump and definitely Prime Minister Netanyahu. At some stage along the way, they will tell all because they're going to want to tell all. Will we believe them? I don't know, but they're going to tell all. And so when we find that out, I do think that Israel had a plan, that the United States had a plan. This is called militaries and security. This was the threat. For a threat, you build the intelligence based on the intelligence, and you think of an operational plan, and then the operational plan says, I need that kind of intelligence. It's a cycle. I'm sure they did in the United States. I know that we did it in Israel, and I think that we did it extensively, and we stopped now. Not because we could stop now, because at the end you talk about the checks and balances. We took out over 50% of the launchers. We took out over 70% of the missiles. We took out all of the top personnel. We attacked all of the different nuclear sites that we know of. And you go, but we could have done more. I'm like, you don't always have to do more. Sometimes you stop, let diplomacy step in, try and ignore the rhetoric. Sorry. Because of course, Khamenei sits there and says what he says. By the way, he said in the last 48 hours again that the Zionist regime needs to end. So to that question that you asked at the beginning, okay? So he said it. I'm not going to end. And here I am. We had absolute air superiority for 12 days. And right now, what we have to look out for in that sense is what happens now. The Islamic regime, just like us, we don't sit around and go, oh, we did well, now we sit back. You look at what the other threats are, what are the challenges, and the biggest challenge right now is that countries that will say that they're doing it to help Iran defend itself, they won't send missiles and launchers and drones to attack, but they would send air defense systems to defend. And I told you before, the air superiority comes out of our very successful campaign against the air defense systems. And if a Russia or a China or a North Korea or a Pakistan, I mean, I'm just saying is, who knows? Because they're not all friends, okay? They each have different interests. But if they would send in air defense systems, that would mean that we would not be able to have that same air superiority again. It would become a whole new campaign. So did I answer? Sort of.
I think so, but Miri, there are a few questions that come in. Jeff's very worried about the enriched uranium. Where is the 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium? Eleanor is asking, how successful were the attacks on the 3 nuclear sites by the Americans?
So to both questions, I'm going to answer what everybody wants to talk about in the world. You don't actually know right now. But believe you me, every commentator on earth will tell you. It was, it wasn't, it is, it isn't. Who knows? I don't think the Iranians know yet, okay? The fact that these talk and those talk. And I say that because when you attack, you can see physically, both during the attack itself and in the aftermath, if you hit the site itself, if you did what you intended to do. But even when you do what you intend to do, that doesn't mean that you know what the results are. And I say that because there's one of the Iranian top advisors of Khamenei that we targeted June 13th in the morning, that we said that we had killed him, and he showed up at the funerals today. He's not dead. So out of the 30 that we targeted, we killed 29. They had the funerals. The 30th showed up and I'm saying in that sort of sense, okay? So was that a success or not? We killed 29 out of the 30 that we targeted. And I give that in the extension that, and we had thought we had killed him as well. When we look at the nuclear sites themselves, they absolutely are damaged in every way possible. None of them were destroyed completely. But again, who knows? When it comes to the enriched uranium, I breathe in deep right now. I'm looking into the camera and I'm saying to all of you, I too am worried. In the worst case scenario, not worst case, in a scenario, they took that enriched uranium and it's now in a different site, secret that we don't know of, where they can enrich it more, because I want to remind you, it's enriched to a certain degree, but they need to enrich it more for it to be military grade. They had enriched it to 60%. It needs to get up to 90%. 60% could make the term of what we call a dirty bomb, but to make real ones, how much were the centrifuges, which are the ones that enrich it? Because as they go round and round and round, I'm doing with my finger, how many of them were destroyed? So I don't believe anything the Iranians say. I'm going to remind you again, they're signed on the NPT. The IAEA in that sense is supposed to have supervision. So as if They were supposed to expose everything they have. So yes, I too am worried about that. I think that in Israel and in the United States, everybody is looking at that. Yofi, let's have the whole world right now be focused on the 400 kilograms that we know of to make sure that they're not going to become a bomb. But to become a bomb, it's not just the material, it's the weaponization, it's the platform. And on those ones, we did very heavy damage. And the term that Israel is using is that we pushed it years back. And you're all going, years? Not forever? Wonderful people. Is there anything forever? We pushed it years back. And to me, that's good. Is it great? It's good. And it's, to me, much better than it was June 12th, if I give as an idea, because on June 12th, they were right about to get there.
So, Miri, Michael has a lot of questions about regime change. I have two very quick ones just before I hand over to him. The one is, and it seemed to be a little surprising to me, but a lot of people have said to me, so did we win the war? Is that an easy question to answer?
I teach courses at Reichman University, and I taught this semester a full course called Middle Eastern Wars. Okay, fun semester to be teaching a seminar on Middle Eastern wars. And I'm sharing that with you right now because one of the elements that I teach there is, when does a war start and when does a war end? And specifically today, we talked about the 12-day war. This was not a 12-day war. This was a portion of a very long campaign that has to do both with the Islamic regime and the annihilation of Israel. So in military terms, we were extraordinarily successful in the 12 days of the direct physical military confrontation between Israel and Iran. Can we turn that into strategic success? Will this change the Middle East? Will it change the alliances? Okay, so in that sense, I'm saying it was an extraordinary military achievement, and that military achievement is not yay for the military. It's about me in my house right now because I came home, because I couldn't come home otherwise. And I'm one person out of so many inside Israel, and I live in a beautiful house. It's not, like people think it's poor people. I'm a rich person and I don't have a safe house. It's like different people don't have them. And so I think that we did extraordinarily well. My challenge to all of us is, how do you take that military success and do something with it? And that'll probably segue into the issues both of regime change, but also in the greater Middle East, because we've been extraordinarily successful against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And it brought about a new regime in Lebanon that may hate us, but they also hate Iran. And it brought about a new regime in Syria that may hate us, but they hate Iran. Okay, that's a huge difference to what was here before. And so I think of it as an extraordinary success in military terms. I'm part of a coalition also, so that you should be aware of that we talk about a coalition for the regional security. We have a lot in common, security issues in common. Let's take our military might and results and turn them into a diplomatic success. We're not always as good at that.
So, Miri, one of the questions, and maybe the hardest question, there are a lot of South African Jewish kids who are due to go on hadracha courses in Israel in a week. Many of the parents are enormously worried about whether they should send their kids into what they believe is a war zone. But the war is over. Obviously, it's not your kids, it's not my kids. Everyone has to make their own decision. But if you were to give parents some advice about sending their kids in a week's time, what advice would you give them?
So two things. One, my kids are in service, so they're in the war. The war is the war against Hamas. The war is the war on the Gaza Strip. And that's the war and where the hostages are. The portion of this war, of the Israel-Iran direct confrontation, is not about to recur. I cannot promise anybody who comes here, anytime, by the way, that there will be no sirens. Yesterday morning, there was a siren in the greater Beersheba area from a Houthi missile. Again, the Houthis are still firing missiles. But at this stage along the way, it's the Houthis, it's not Iran. People have asked me that from the States. I was doing a briefing yesterday with a group I work with in the States. And I said to them, I would get on the plane and come, and I would send my children. I think that what you do need is that you look at the program. And as I said before, at the end, we know how to take care of people. And I don't think in any way whatsoever that this is going to blow up again between Iran and Israel. And that to me is the danger. If I thought that Iran was about to do something, I would say this is not the time to come. I don't think that Iran is about to do anything. I think that I'm emphasizing, I think that what's the miss aspect of what's seen right now is how much we did in Iran, how much they're licking their wounds, how much they're not about to start something when we have this absolute air superiority. They are also going and seeing now what we did to them. It's not just about us going and going, oh my God, look at what happened here. Because what happened here is physical damage. And I don't know of anybody, I say very sadly to myself, there's absolutely a family that was killed in a mamad, in a safe room. And by the way, they were just going back into it and they hadn't closed the door. And again, that at the end, that's what we do. There are different people who are here and programs that are here. I would say it's safe, but that's me, Miri. I think that any misgeret, any system that's going to tell them to come, believe the Israelis. We're not saying it because we want you to come to a war zone. We're saying it because we feel very safe here. Because right now, again, the war against Hamas and the Gaza Strip is one thing, but the rest of us, we're here, it's open, we're fine, we act responsibly. It's really nice being here right now because there are no tourists. Your kids will have an amazing time.
And of course, let's not forget in their home country, between 70 and 80 people are murdered every day, and the highest murder rate in the world.
Oh my God.
Much safer to be in Israel. But Miri, while you were in your mamad, your safe room last Sunday, Michael and I continued talking together with our audience for about 50 minutes. And one of the things we decided to do was to raise some money to refurbish bomb shelters. Michael, how did we do?
Howard, we did really great. I think big thank you to the South African Jewish community and the South African Jewish Report for supporting the project. We'd hoped to be able to raise enough money to refurbish 18 public bomb shelters. And thanks to everyone's support, we've been able to do more than we expected, and we've managed to raise enough money for 28 public bomb shelters. So really a big thank you. And the outpouring of support from the South African Jewish community was amazing. Hundreds and hundreds of people gave to the project, and I think it's very important that South Africans feel connected and feel that we can contribute in some way to help the people of Israel when they experiencing what they've been experiencing. So I'm very proud of the South African Jewish community, and really a big thank you to everybody, to my team at the JNF, especially to Bev Schneider, our national director, Kiki Shalped and Lisa Kotzen, who support her. They've been working the phones, emails for the last 2 weeks solid, and they've really done an amazing job raising the money that they have. So a big shkayach to everybody.
And what's amazing is, while obviously you have some donors who've given a lot of money, there are also donors who gave 18 Rand and 36 Rand because that's what they could afford. And that in itself is as important as someone who gives 18,000 or 180,000. The fact that our community, and not just our community, because we're not just a Jewish show, we have people of all races and all ethnicities and all religions who watch us, and people who watch around the world. So Michael, a little later, while Miri is answering some of your questions, Miri, if you don't mind, we're going to put up a slide and give people an opportunity to donate more money to refurbish, and literally every single cent that we raise goes to refurbish a bomb shelter in Israel so people can stay safe.
That makes me so, I'm like proud to be part of this community, because one of the things that we talk about is resilience, and everybody always talks about Israeli resilience, but you're part of that resilience. And it's funny because in academic terms, when we talk about resilience and we talk about what most people are thinking of, is they're thinking about how you have to absorb, okay, take it in, but you don't just absorb, you also have to adapt. And this is part of that adapting. That's the real resilience, is that you don't only absorb, you also adapt. But to really get through in resilience is when we're going to be recovering. And here, where you're doing things like that, that's helping us recover. And at the end, we will thrive. And that's why together we're going to be that much stronger. So that's an amazing aspect. And I think it's spot on the one that needs to be done. Again, we're not the same war zone that we were for 12 days. You weren't allowed to come near here then, and it was scary for us. And because of bomb shelters, we're here. And I'll just share with you that really close friends of my parents, and I think I was going to say this last week, but on Sunday last week, it's like the best friends of my parents. My dad's already passed away. My mom is not really, but my parents' best friends live in a house, and that house was destroyed in an attack last Sunday. And the reason they're alive is because of a bomb shelter. And as they were saying to me, they said, you know, when the siren goes off, you have the sense that maybe you'll just go down to that little safe place. And I was like, no, they chose it, and they had to go across the street to a bomb shelter. And they closed the door with all of their different, and they're alive, and they came out after 35 minutes, no house. And in a place like that, where you rebuild that bomb shelter, where it's a place, because they're used all over Israel, where you use them as a place where it can be, you know, in day-to-day life for kids and fun, whatever. Because really what you want to have is you kind of want to have a padded room with lots of mattresses to make it comfortable and nice, because it's a scary place.
So if people
Okay.
have their cell phones nearby, and if you just want to point your camera at that little barcode on the screen, that will take you through to a donation page, or alternatively, just take a picture. The JNF banking details are there, and we'll make sure that every single cent raised goes towards protecting the people of Israel. That is something that we do in conjunction with Keren Kayemet LeYisrael and the JNF South Africa, and something that we're enormously, enormously proud of. But Mike, while we'll keep it up for another 30 seconds, you had some questions about regime change in Iran as well for me.
Yes, Miri, great. So, you know, sort of a lot of people have said, why did Israel stop? You know, we didn't finish the job, that we should have, you know, regime change was the key, that if we want to change the dynamic in the region, you know, we've given them a good smack and we've pushed them back a year or two. But what have we really fundamentally changed about Iran with this war? The only real way to do that would be to overthrow the Ayatollah and, you know, have a more moderate regime in place with a different ideology. And it seems like Israel just never got, you know, they bombed that prison was a small taste of what they could do, but that didn't really seem to be the objective, and they never really achieved it.
It isn't a military objective that's achievable. You have to always put things into perspective. The Islamic regime was a popular regime. It overthrew the Shah before. It had very broad popular support as it became more and more conservative and extreme and dictatorship and barbaric to its own people. As I said, 50% still support it, and probably around 50% are very much against it. But how can they have a voice? If they say anything, they're put in those horrific jails. And I say that because you can't bomb that out of existence. We're talking about 45 years of education, 45 years. This isn't an outer force that came into Iran that are not local. These are locals, Persian-speaking Shiites. That regime is a local Persian Shiite regime. And to do that type of regime change, you can't do it from the outside. There's no question that in our exposing the weakness in itself of its capability to protect itself, to protect its own people, and its vulnerability, if I would call it in that way, even though I don't think of them as vulnerable. They're not a victim. They're trying to pose themselves now as victims. They are a sovereign country with 92 million people that use their income to build the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, to export the Islamic Revolution, to annihilate the Zionist entity through the proxies and through themselves. And to change that kind of regime, you can't just bomb it out. If we had killed Khamenei, they would have had somebody else instead. We killed all of those different decision makers because it made a really big difference in these days of the immediate decision making and capability to respond in this campaign of these 12 days. But that doesn't make the difference in the regime change. And my heart can go out, as I said, I've had this dialogue endlessly until they change the ideology. And I'm like, why are they going to change the ideology? But yeah, it's a challenge, not just in Iran. I think that all of us understand that, to me, what the Islamic regime has exported most successfully is in using both its technological prowess, its capability to online, social media, bots, to get it all out there, to put out the instability and the horrific voices, so anti-Israel, so anti-Zionist in such a horrific way. If we can, subdue that. One of the side effects of the campaign in the 12 days, the Islamic regime, because of domestic woes, not because of about the world, but because they didn't want domestically for people to know what was going on domestically, they didn't want them sharing information about what was being attacked. They didn't want the information to show how vulnerable they were. The Islamic regime turned off the internet in those 12 days inside Iran, the way that China does. They put up a firewall, they stopped it, okay? All of the providers could not provide. So it was really people, who had satellite phones who could do so. Why am I sharing that with you? Because they immediately saw the impact in Microsoft and Google, in the different platforms that support different social media capabilities. They saw a big difference in bots, in the things that echo and amplify negative voices in all sorts of different ways, all sorts of different voices, because Iran does that. And so I would love that to change. I don't think that we can do that. I want to hope that the Persian-speaking people will do that. And I can ask the same thing about Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah within the Shiites in Lebanon still has complete support. People didn't turn against Hezbollah because they did not do what they're supposed to do and did not. And so, yeah, we have our challenges out there for us. But what we have shown is that rhetoric, which is horrific, poisonous, and is an enormous challenge for us in the world, but that rhetoric with the military capabilities, we really degraded the military capabilities, and that also means that we degraded the capability of the Islamic regime to rearm Hezbollah, to rearm the Houthis, to give them more capabilities. We've really hurt that whole structure. But no, we didn't do a regime change.
And Miri, people have asked also on the chat, but we were going to ask you as well, the Crown Prince, who's been quite outspoken, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Not sure if I pronounced his name correctly, but
I think you did.
Oh, my Persian's obviously getting better. But what is he a realistic person to come in and foment regime change, or are there other elements within the society? We don't hear about opposition leaders or anything like that would give us hope that there is actually an alternative to the Islamic regime. Is there an alternative? Is he a realistic alternative?
In 2009, there were people who came out and spoke out and tried to go out. It was called the Green Revolution, and it was horrifically and barbarically subdued. That's what these type of regimes do. It's about their own regime, and you can't have an opposition and an opposition voice inside Iran because they are arrested and put into horrific jails or just executed, because they execute 400 to 600 people that we know of a year, both through Islamic law, by the way. Just for the women watching us right now, if you are a woman in the Islamic regime of Iran and you are accused and found guilty of adultery, everybody waiting, you're stoned to death. I'm talking 2025. No, can't be, right? I swear. But I'm just saying in that sense that because of that, there is no voice of opposition. All of the Persian-speaking Iranian opposition is outside, because if you're inside, you're arrested and killed. And so I can't quantify how much of an impact they'd actually have. Because, he left, okay, 45 years ago, okay? Almost longer than that, 1979, that's heading on into 48 years ago. Is that the person why would they want him? I want to remind again, everybody, that the Pahlavi family, the Shah, was not a nice dictator. Okay. He was a dictator. He was a Western dictator, but Western-oriented dictator. And so the regime, the opposition figures, a lot of them are in Europe, a lot of them are in the United States. They have a strong voice. There's a magnificent Persian diaspora. As I said, it's a thing. Persian is a culture and a history and a language and a land. And so what I want is that they be as Persian as they want. They be as Islamic as they want. but that they don't see as part of their ideology the annihilation of the Zionist entity as being the way to make the world a better place and the world a more just place. I mean, I'm saying it as if facetiously, but to me, that's such a challenging aspect because it's gone into the Shiite world. It's in the Islamic regime. It's in Hezbollah. It's in the Houthis. Hamas describe it in a different way. Hamas are Sunni. They're not Shiite. But that common ground of the oppressed against the Zionist entity as the oppressor, that is our big challenge looking now into the future. That's our challenge because of what's happening in the United Kingdom and what's happening in South Africa and what's happening in the United States, not what's happening in Iran, Lebanon, or Yemen. These are things that we need to contend with because we're being portrayed as the worst country on earth, the worst oppressor on earth, the most immoral on earth, and not by Iran and Hezbollah, but by some of the Westerners.
Mike, can I sneak in a question about the Jewish community?
How much time? How much longer do we have?
Miri, can we keep you 5 or 6 minutes?
Yeah.
The Jewish community in Iran, they asked on the chat about how they coping with this. There were reports of people being arrested. I don't know if you saw that.
So I've seen that as well. And so a few things. One is that there used to be, as we all know, a very large Jewish community inside Iran. And one of the things that the Islamic regime has done throughout since 1979 consistently is they say we're not anti-Semitic, we're anti-Zionist entity, so that they always brought out, trotted out the Jewish community to show, see, these are Persian Jews and they're not Zionists, these are Persian Jews. And having said that, throughout all of the years, it's called that double-edged sword because they would arrest Jews and accuse them of being spies on behalf of Israel. And that is something that we've seen over the last few days, again, as a headline. I don't know the details any more than anybody else does. That Jewish community there in between a rock and a hard stone, they're Persian and they lived there all those years, and Persian Jewry is a magnificent jewelry that has given so much to the world. And they stayed there. And then you go, why did they stay there? And they go, again, because at the end, it's very hard to leave. I know that the last Jew of Afghanistan already left. I mean, there was one left there. But there was a significant Jewish community that still stayed, both in Shiraz and in Tehran and a bit in Mashhad. And now I fear for them dearly. And I'm wondering how the Islamic regime will code it. Because they're not anti-Semitic, right? She says in her sarcastic voice, they're only anti-Zionist. Oh, but all Jews happen to be Zionists. Okay, let's go back to the different correlation that we were talking about before. So yes, I don't know more than that, but I absolutely think that they will go against it and in a focused way, because right now they are about regime survival. And we poked holes into that regime by showing what they had invested in for the last 40 years, proxies and nuclear capabilities. There went that investment that was supposed to protect Iran. So they're looking right now at their regime survival, and they're being very harsh against all sorts of different aspects inside society there.
Miri, if we can sneak in our very last question. A year and a half ago, the world looked very different. We had Hezbollah, who posed an enormous threat from Lebanon. We had a war with Hamas, but a heavily armed Hamas with many rockets. We had an aggressive Syrian regime. We had Iran on the brink of nuclear weapons. The world looks very different today. So if we were to project a little forward to what the world could look like in a year's time, do you think that it's a pipe dream that maybe the Abraham Accords would, in a year's time, include Syria and Saudi Arabia? How do you think the Middle East will look differently in 12 months?
I want to hope that our military capabilities in exposing the Islamic regime's lack of credibility in what they say in their sense, that this will bring about the diplomacy, which is not a dirty word, the diplomacy within the greater Middle East, and bring about new alliances, broaden alliances. And I am so not a Pollyanna. I'm so not one who sees everything good. Au contraire, I'm the one who is going to say, do this and be aware of that. And that's fine, doing things with an open idea. I absolutely think that there is an opportunity right now, not to cash in, but to use that military might that we used, very targeted, very specifically, to help advance a new regional alliance. To be clear to everybody listening right now, I don't think it can happen without the Palestinian arena. Meaning there is a whole opportunity here right now, and everybody's going, she brought the Palestinians into the room. Having said that, that new opportunity to look both, I mean, because it takes into account also the Gaza Strip, which is a tragedy. It's not going to suddenly be beautiful in the Gaza Strip, but Lebanon is a changed country. Syria is a changed country. I mentioned before, both of them hate us, but they hate Iran more. And we border them. And I say that because that brings about a new alliance. Jordan and Egypt are very, very challenged right now by Muslim Brotherhood, which is similar to what Hamas is. So, and we have treaties with Egypt, with Jordan, with the Emirate countries, the Gulf countries. So there is that new opportunity. But at the end, and it's not a but, it's part of where we are, the Palestinian issue has to be in some way addressed. I didn't say resolved. I didn't say peace. I didn't say two states. But it has to be addressed. And as soon as I say that, everybody's going, oh, now nothing's going to happen. And I think that the opportunity is that now that will happen. That the decisions that were made both by the United States and by Israel, because of the 50 hostages that we need to get back, there is an opportunity, as I said, to take our military capabilities and might and transition into diplomacy. And diplomacy isn't, cocktail parties and easy. It's hard, it's long, but it is something which could change in the future. And yes, I do hope to see a big change within a year. And again, at the end has to do a lot with the elephant in the room that I'll end with, which is the Israeli government, because we've managed for the last hour and a bit to 100% avoid any questions or aspect of the domestic Israeli issue. And there's a domestic Israeli issue as well, because at the end, this is about ideology and policies. And when I say all of that, you want the peace with Syria, you want the peace with Lebanon, but you don't want other things. At the end, the question is what will give and what will take.
Miri Eisin, once again, a huge thank you for giving your time, your knowledge, but really your heart and soul to the Jewish community in South Africa, to the thousands and thousands of people who watched us tonight. It was so nice to see that we even had people watching this evening from Ghana, from various places in Africa, from people in Central and South America. The reach has just been enormous. But not only do you communicate just so beautifully and clearly, but you communicate such knowledge which isn't readily available to all of us. So I want to thank you once again for giving up your Sunday evening to dragging you away from your family. Absolutely, our hearts are with you, and we look forward to being with you in person as well. Miri Eisin, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Howard Michael. Always a pleasure. And until next time, shalom lekulam, and let's hope that we have a beautiful summer.
Fantastic, Miri. And Michael, Miri was talking about hostages. You are about to bring out some hostages to South Africa.
Yeah, Howard, that's right. We have this project.
I'm signing off.
Bye, Miri. Thanks so much. We have this project with the base community to bring hostages. It's a joint venture between the JNF and the base community to bring hostages to returned hostages and hostage families to South Africa for rest and recovery. And we've had a few in the past: Noah Agamani, Moran Selayanai, Elia Cohen, and Almog Marian. We've had a few, and the next delegation is coming up at the end of July and the beginning of August. We've got the Shoam family, and it's quite an amazing story. We're really looking forward to hosting them in South Africa. The wife and the two children were kidnapped from Kibbutz Be'eri, and they were released in the first peace hostage deal. But Tal Shoam, their husband and father, was in Gaza for over 500 days before he was reunited with his family. So the entire family, all four of them, were hostages in Gaza, and they'll be coming to South Africa for a visit, for some rest, for some recovery. They're going to be in Durban, they're going to be in Cape Town, and they're going to be in the bush. and hopefully we'll let you know shortly about some events around them so that you can come in person and interact with them and show them the tremendous warmth and solidarity that the South African Jewish community has shown so far to the other returned hostages that have come to South Africa. So we're looking very, very forward to that.
Remarkable. I do want to ask the people who are still watching us just to leave a note for Miri, because we'd love for you to be able to say thank you to her for sharing of her knowledge and wisdom with us this evening. With that, I want to thank everyone who has joined us this evening. We're going to leave up the screen if you do want to make a donation to the JNF in order to rebuild and to make sure that bomb shelters are available to all Israelis. We're going to leave that up on the screen. But with that, please leave us a message for Miri that we can pass on to her, to thank her for giving of her time and giving of her knowledge to all of us in South Africa and around the world this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I think the next one we're going to do is actually going to be something completely different. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.